earlier on water. I think there's some things that we still need to do, but I think one of the biggest things we need to do is look at what's working and what's not working on the policies that we've passed and make sure that we're moving together in the right direction. So I think you'll see that on a lot of policy fronts. But I think that, again, the number one biggest policy thing that I can think of that we're going to be working on that I'm happy to share now ahead of those priorities coming out is working closely with the federal government to make sure Utah remains a sovereign state and the Utahns get to make decisions for Utah.
What was discussed in caucus today, even though there's no leadership changes, is there anything the body thinks you guys as a team could do better? Or is there anything that the members of the House felt like you could improve on or would like to, see changes from your leadership team?
So I'm gonna not go and speak in the body because we didn't really talk about that. But each member of the leadership team had one-on-one conversations with every member of the caucus, and that's one of the things I appreciate most about our caucus. And you have to have thick skin sometimes to run for leadership because for the most part, our members are honest with you. They'll tell you their concerns that they have and the things that they like. And so I'm confident. I know I heard some criticisms of myself. I'm sure others heard criticisms of themselves. We also heard a lot of the good things that our caucus members appreciate. And so those are conversations that we have one-on-one with the members to make sure we're meeting those needs.
I'd just maybe add, even the conversations that we had in terms of some of the stuff we talked about based on the feedback was, how do we make sure that people's voices are all being heard, that there's an opportunity for them to engage in policy discussions and be able to provide that feedback. And I think that's something we all feel very strongly about, is how do we create that unity. We may not always agree, and we know that, right? We have a very diverse group of people. They all bring incredibly great skills, backgrounds, but represent different parts of the state. And how do we make sure that we're getting that engagement so that we can come up with the best policies? So that was a lot of what we talked about.
Yeah, and I think we have developed a better process for our caucus priorities to involve more of those voices and make sure that we are really capturing what the body's priorities are. And I think we've done a really good job of that over the year, and the body has appreciated it. But we're also working to increase our outreach to the public, directly to the public with our caucus priorities, to have that communication one-on-one with the citizens of Utah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I heard loud and clear is that our caucus members really appreciated the fact that we've created an atmosphere where they can feel like they can express their views and their concerns are heard. And they get credit in that to every member of the leadership team, a lot of the ones that I heard and spoke with. So, yeah. Emily.
Yeah, I'd like to pivot back to priorities a little bit. You talked about some of the big Republican wins in Washington and how that impacts kind of an overarching theme. You'd like to see this next session with state sovereignty. I'm curious if there are any specific policy areas where you feel you'll be able to exercise that more.
Yeah, well, I think, probably the biggest thing overarching is it's no secret. Utah has felt the pressure from the federal government, and not Congress. This is from the unelected bureaucrats coming from inside Washington, D.C. through the Biden administration. And we're going to do all we can to get and push back on those things and try to cement them from happening again in the future. The things that we saw coming at us to change Utah and to force us into becoming states like California, Oregon, and Washington was unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I'm proud of the American people for pushing back on that agenda, and I really believe that states are the laboratory of democracy, and it ought to be left up to the states. That's what the Constitution intended, and that's what we need to get back to. And so we've had conversations with the Trump administration about that. They're fully supportive of that. Governor Caucus has talked about this a couple times, and he's even had Democrat governors tell him that that they felt more supported under the Trump administration than the Biden administration. And so, and as being in a leadership team under the Trump administration and a leadership team under the Biden administration, it was a clear difference, and we look forward to Utah having a louder voice in Utah managing its affairs, not the federal government managing Utah affairs.
And maybe, Speaker, if I could add to that too. I mean, you guys have all seen it. but I think it's incredibly helpful to that cause that the governor of California, Governor Newsom, that was one of the first things he mentioned, is ensuring that the sovereignty of that state is maintained under this administration. And I think as our state, we look forward to having those discussions about how we maintain ourselves moving forward as well. So
I think it's a bipartisan thing for the most part. It's one of the few things we agree on, and Republicans and Democrats both. Neither one of us want the federal government telling us what to do.
So what specific policies do you anticipate changing, especially as you spoke about, what you faced under the Biden administration? What do you anticipate will be different with the Trump administration?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is the public lands stuff. That's probably the one. Again, we all know this, we've seen this. It's no longer trying to shut down drilling, oil drilling and grazing or whatever it is. They're closing access down to the citizens of this state and closing down recreation opportunities. And that's probably one of the biggest and most important things that I view as a top priority, is making sure our public lands remain public and accessible to everybody. And we're going to fight hard to make sure that happens. And that, some of these, and Casey's the expert in this area, but some of these management plans coming at us to actually take a hands-off, don't touch approach, that's not what the public lands are there for. The public lands are there for the citizens of this state and the citizens of the nation, for that matter, to enjoy. It's what makes Utah, Utah, and it's one of the things that I'm most passionate about and why I love Utah so much.
Do you anticipate, say, like the petition you have before the Supreme Court, under the Trump administration no longer needing that? And is that based on any conversations you had with the Trump administration or the incoming administration?
No, regardless of the administration, that's a petition that we're still going to move forward with.
The incoming administration's likely going to be very friendly on energy policy. I know that's been a huge focus up here over the last couple of years. Do you foresee any change in course now that the Trump administration, or the incoming Trump administration, will be in place as it pertains to Utah's energy future?
Absolutely, and we're really excited about that. Honestly, I'll never forget the conversation we had when Rocky Mountain Power came out with their 2032, or their what do you call it, RFP, not RFP, what's it called? IRP, their IRP. And it said that we're going to shut down our coal plants by 2032. Okay, then what? And the room goes blank. This is Rocky Mountain Power officials. Well, what are we going to replace our energy with? Utah requires 60%, or right now we're using 60% of our energy by coal. It's about 90% this time of day is done powered by coal. When you ask, okay, if we're going to shut it down, then what? And the room's silent, and they don't have a plan, and they say, well, we're being pushed to go here, that's a problem. We took a fight against the Biden-Harris administration last year, really over the last 2 years, to push back and say, no, that is not acceptable. We're going to make sure we have reliable, dispatchable, and affordable energy for the citizens of our state, and we are not going to let Utah turn into some of these other states where they're having brownouts and blackouts. It's not going to happen. So what I do.
Speaker, I was just going to add, the president not allowing permitting of natural gas. They literally were getting to a point where you were holding everything back.
Yeah.
And we are truly an all of the above state. We are leaning in aggressively on everything. We're looking at geothermal, we're looking at nuclear, we're looking at everything. And for the citizens of the state, we have to do that. The concern we have is if you don't, especially those who are more vulnerable, cost of energy could go up dramatically. We want to make sure that we continue to provide that affordable energy for all of our citizens.
It's the number one reason you've seen energy prices, as far as power generation, skyrocket across this nation. And we've done a really good job to keep it as low as we possibly can in Utah, and it's working. We're the lowest in the nation right now, and I suspect we're going to continue being one of the lowest in the nation. And it's because we're going to put in the policies that's an all of the above approach.
Back to public lands real quick. Why continue that petition, through a lawsuit rather than solve the matter through the Trump administration? Why continue the petition?
Maybe, and I'll jump in here too, because I think one of the things that's really been a detriment to both sides of this issue is that yo-yoing via administration. Think of the Bears here specifically, right? President Obama makes a designation, President Trump winds it back, then Biden puts it back on the landscape. That's not good for those communities, that's not good for that resource. I think long term, for this to be resolved in a way that benefits all interests, we need to have legal certainty. And the only way to get to that point is through that petition.
Are you working on legislative fixes to that, with working with the delegation to solve some of those problems?
Yes, that is one of our top priorities with our delegation. We have met with the delegation as a leadership team and the delegation as a whole. We've all had conversations around that. Most recently I had a conversation with Senator Curtis, soon to be Senator Curtis, and it's going to be one of his top priorities as well moving forward. So yeah, we're going to take, again, we say this on energy, we're taking all the above approach on our public lands to make sure it remains open and accessible to everybody.
One of the areas where there's been a lot of discussion among your caucus, and frankly disagreement and tension, is around election processes in the state. And so I'm curious how, whether that's something that you plan to have some policy changes around next session, and how you're approaching smoothing some of those tensions over as you move into 2025.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, Emily. There has been a lot of concern, and you know, I think overall it's important to point out that we truly believe that we have really good elections in the state of Utah and that they are secure for the most part. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have issues in areas that we need to work on. And I think going through this election process has highlighted some of the things and areas that we need to work on together collaboratively, we hope. Not with the governor and the governor's office and the Senate, but as an extension to the county clerks as well, because really it's the county clerks that run and the elections all across the state. And so we look forward to going through the session, working collaboratively. There will be changes coming forward that we're going to be working on and pushing. I don't want to get into the details. We kind of give a little hint on a few of the things and a few of the statements. What's that?
Postmarking deadline, same-day registration.
I think you'll see some increase in transparency as well.
Yeah.
Like Speaker said, we're not probably going to get into policies at this point. We're still developing them, but working closely with colleagues, and we all are, to ensure that those policies are good and right for the citizens of Utah. And it's a perception of trust, or it's trust in the elections, right? And you've seen the polling. There's a lack of trust from a lot of the citizens in the state, and so we want to increase transparency and make sure that everybody can trust what our elections are doing.
I think that's an area. Representative Lisby hit the nail on the head with transparency. It's probably one of the biggest things, and transparency to the process so the citizens can feel comfortable.
And we have time for one or two more questions.
I'm curious if that includes maybe some larger scale changes, like what Representative Wilcox was looking at proposing last session.
Yeah, no, it's no secret. I think we ought to look at taking the elections and moving it to a different process than having it done under the lieutenant governors. It's not that I think anything is fishy or funny or anything like that, but it's not a great look. And I think when you're overseeing or perceived to be overseeing your own election, I think we can do better and come up with a better process. So we'll see what that looks like moving forward, but it is going to be one of the discussions that we're going to have going forward.
In the spirit of transparency, were there any lessons learned and changes for the future for, Amendment A, Amendment D being killed off the ballot?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and I'll take that, and I made some mistakes, and I'll own that, and I think that we're going to work together to find better ways,
What mistakes are you referring to? I was going to ask about, Amendment D, what happened there, any changes from leadership, any lessons learned from leadership about what happened with Amendment D and A that you would be fixing?
Yeah, well, obviously the notification, that was an important one, and then also I think how the ballot question gets written, I think are things that we learned. We don't have any solutions to those yet, and so those will be things that we work through the process.
So is that a regret that ballot language wasn't written more clearly?
Well, I probably have a regret in that we used the word strengthened. I think that's probably the regret that, with that. I truly believe it was factual. We could have been a little more clear on what strengthened meant, but then the language becomes too big. So, I think taking that word out probably would have been better.
Was there heartache within the body, the House, around how that all played out?
Well, there's always heartache. There's always heartache.
Okay, I think we're done, thanks.
So, we'll go one more, if there's another one.
Well, on that, I mean, what do you envision changing then? When you said that, you know, there may be some changes about
Yeah.
language and things like that, what
You
do
know,
you envision changing?
Well, we gotta work with the Senate, and see, but, you know, the question becomes, you know, who writes the language and then what's all put in there, and then also and what's put in how it's described. And then also the process to make sure that the notification happens, or that maybe the notification's done differently. I think anybody would could make the argument that there's a better way of disseminating the information than printing it in the newspapers today.
That would require a constitutional amendment though,
Yeah.
right?
But we don't have buy-in on this yet, so I'm getting ahead of, because I don't know that that's going to be the solution, but those are the areas that we're going to focus on. Okay, thank you
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Appreciate it.